Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Beyond the Summit coverage of the Southeast Asian Series. I'm Lyrical Dota, joined today by Danny Lee Cass as well as Corrupt Drop Air on the stats. We're going to be going on into Game 2 here of RRQ up against PewPew after a thrilling and exciting Game 1 that ended up being just back and forth, non-stop action, 80 kills in just about 52 minutes. It was spectacular, tons of fun, buybacks across the board. It was just a thriller. Danny, how are you doing? Are you hoping we end up getting another game like that? I'm sure you are.
Oh, of course. Who doesn't? Who wants a boring farm game? Please raise your hand.
No hands were raised.
But yeah, that was a really fun game one, and I think it was just purely off the back of PewPew. They played much more polished Dota. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were waiting for. Whereas for RRQ, I think their major issue for them lies with the fact that they made a couple of small mistakes, and the small mistakes ended up just being buyback status and one bad decision, and that turned into costing them the entire game. And I think for them, coming into this second game, they have to be a little bit more careful with how they play things, try and polish it up a little bit, and I think at this point, play safer Dota. I think that's all that they have to do. If they can play a similar style, but play it safer, then I think they're going to be solid for a third game.
Absolutely. And, I think there the point you make about it just being safer, a little bit more solid, a little bit more, trying to not overextend. I think back to that mid-tier 3 fight that ended up happening where the reinitiation happened and they ended up feeding away the PL 1900 gold after that all was said and done. And it just was such a strange move where they felt like they were going to be able to pick off the bounty hunter before the sort of the tides shifted back into them, and they just got picked off. And I think that probably we were talking the whole game about how we saw that RRQ was on a bit of a timer just based upon the heroes that they ended up having. And I think that it was already starting to shift a little bit more towards PPWA, but it gave them that huge influx, and they're feeling comfortable to push in up that top lane and start to get the barracks as well. And it felt to me like it was such a huge turning point. This time around, interestingly though, we're going to be seeing the Winter Wyvern Darkseer going the side of RRQ, and this a great lineup. I think that you think about the scalability. It scales well because it scales with your enemy heroes. I think this is a great start for them.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting game. I think I'm going to point this out. I'm a little sad. We're seeing a couple of repeated heroes. Oh,
yeah.
Well, that's fine. I'm hoping we see something a little bit different from either side. Maybe just going for something fun for that final pick, but who doesn't like those heroes? But everything you said was definitely on point there. And RRQ, they're going to go for massive team fight this game. So they're going to take the Winter Wyvern and the Darkseer themselves this time. Plus, it's like they're almost swapping drafts aside from the Dazzle pick.
Yeah, definitely. That to me seems like the only thing that's really different at all, and probably going to be a really big point here. So I really like PewPew's draft. Well, all right, it's kind of back and forth. Here are my thoughts. You end up seeing also the Tusk there. He's going to be a defensive hero. Dazzle, defensive hero. Gyrocopter needs those type of abilities to save him out in the middle of a team fight. If you end up getting the control on top of the Tusk and the Dazzle in the later stages of the game, Gyrocopter falls. I think the other thing here is going to be seeing how these lanes work out. And so far, we're not really seeing the super aggression out of anybody except for maybe the Tusk. We did see the other day a dual roaming support combo of Tusk Dazzle where you set up a heal bomb coming out. But I don't know if that's what we're going to be seeing this time.
Oh, I think you can see heal bombs this game. There's a Spirit Breaker. So now you have Spirit Breaker, Tusk, and a Dazzle to try and go in for those heal bomb kills.
Yeah.
Definitely, I can definitely see this happening for PewPew. So maybe the game's going to shift in the other direction now. PewPew's going to go for that super early game aggressive style, and RRQ is going to be the one to sort of sit back passively and try and go for those counter plays. Although last game, it was actually PewPew to be the aggressors, whereas RRQ kind of just started up slow, but then they eventually reached a point where they did decide to fight. But it was a little bit later than we were honestly expecting. But PewPew, lots of aggression. I think they need a little bit more scaling damage though. Outside of the Gyrocopter, Spirit Breaker and Tusk, they don't do too much. I think Tusk does a little bit more than Spirit Breaker, but they don't have the best scaling damage.
Yeah, they don't. And maybe we end up seeing something along the lines of an Ember in the mid lane. It's not the most uncommon thing in the world against the Shadow Fiend. You could also go back for that TA. I wouldn't hate that one either, although you are, of course, going up against the Winter Wyvern, which makes that a little bit less palatable. But I think that, like you said there, somebody with a little bit more damage, somebody who can potentially really sort of amp that up. The other thing that I'm kind of wondering, they could go back for the Lina again. just because you do still have a lot of damage coming out from the Lagunium. It would put them on a bit of a shorter timer this time around. I don't think that they would be the better scaling teams depending upon who RRQ end up going for their safe lane. But it's worth noting that we are still looking for them in either a support or a safe lane hero. I think that the Spirit Breaker might have been a bit of a sort of ban pick for them also by being able to deny them away that Dark Seer Spirit Breaker, jump on in there with the Ion Shell combo that can be so potent. But maybe they end up going for their own type. Wow, Ogre Magi, that's a hero we haven't seen in a while.
I like this hero. I like him a lot. And I'm really surprised why a lot of teams don't pick him up a little bit more. He's incredibly tanky. He gives you a superb support kit. And I think the major thing with Ogre Magi is that he is amazing for early game tower dives. He has 8 armor, is it? Level 1 or 7 armor? 7 or 8 armor, something along the lines. It is stupid for a support. He has one of the highest base HP pools of a intelligence hero as well. So you can play super aggressive with an Ogre Magi if you want. And if he does manage to get his own set of farm and he eventually gets an Ags, you've got 2 stuns on a support that could potentially throw out carry comparable damage output to maybe a semi-carry, because you might get those lucky, God, what's it called? Multicasts.
Yeah, if you've been practicing enough, obviously your skill will be high enough where you can get those multicasts, which will be great. The other thing to keep in mind is Bloodlust. It's an item that's often overlooked with this hero, but the bonus movement speed as well as attack speed going up to 60 at max level. Maybe they end up going back for the Tiny again, feeling comfortable with it. A Bloodlusted Tiny is a scary Tiny. And the other thing that I kind of am noticing here out of them is that they do have a lot of potential to defend in the late game. Winter Wyvern Darkseer are always going to be a potent combo. There's the Meepo. Mr. Meepo going to be played this time around. We didn't get to talk about him a ton, but now you need something to be able to deal with this guy. What do you think about a Sven maybe? Is that a decent hero peer, or what are your thoughts on Meepo counters?
My thoughts on Well, you pointed this out yesterday. The best way to deal with a Meepo is single target burst. If you can actually control up that single Meepo and burst him down from 100 to 0, that's it. You kill one Meepo, you kill all of them. And for RRQ, look at their current draft. They have decent spread damage, but they don't have the best single target damage when you look at all their spells. And Tiny is, in regards, similar to a Sven. He has much higher burst potential though, so I kind of like the Tiny going up against the Meepo. And if you're in a scenario where you have to actually man-fight him, you can rely on not just the Craggy, but also the Cleave. You can kill all the Meepos.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Definitely. And I guess the only thing that you really have to be concerned about now for the Tiny is, are you going to be able to get to that stage where you get the Aghanim Scepter? And it's going to rely upon early stacks and him being the one that takes him and not the Shadow Fiend. So the pieces are there to be able to make it happen. And again, it looks like it's going to come down to execution, and hopefully, at least at this point in time for the side of RRQ, being able to sort of weather the storm of that early aggression and making sure they don't overextend if they do come out to an early lead. So I'm very curious. I think that they have the pieces. Also, as I mentioned, the Bloodlust up on Tiny is going to help a lot in terms of his damage output once he ends up getting that Aghanim Scepter, as I take on off the overlay, because I hear that people don't like to watch games through overlays. That's at least sort of what I'm hearing.
Well, I think people just haven't been to prison, because if you're in prison, you see through bars throughout your whole life. But aside from that, though, so we spoke about the Meepo a little bit, how RRQ counters that out. Let's talk more about the combination of the Tiny and the Ogre Magi. Is this, to some extent, a pseudo-Wisp, because he's essentially just buffing up with attack speed and movement speed?
Yeah, I think that that's one part of it. The obviously downside to it is that you don't have the defensive capabilities that you have with the Wisp, both in terms of being able to heal them up as it's going down, like in the middle of a fight, but also the fact that you can't relocate them back out. So those are going to be the components that the Tiny is going to be missing, and it's going to come down to really good positioning to be able to deal with it effectively, as the Meepo drops his boots in the Darkseer's face, and the Darkseer in return drops his Observer Ward. A little bit of that is awesome. Oh, I love that. I'll tell a story some other day about me playing chess with a man from Germany, but it reminded me of that for some reason, which is a very strange anecdote that I'm not going to go into depth about. But regardless, items being dropped on town, and we're going to keep on going here, as the Tusk is actually going to wrap around.
Oh. So, just a question, is this how they put wards down in Southeast Asia? Because I'm pretty sure this is not how you use the item, but it's actually still there, and Fury's actually going to get caught out here by AK Racing. We're going to have to man-fight him for a little bit, and here comes support as well. The Dazzle and the Gyro, not the best catch, so Fury can just waltz out of this, and he'll be fine. The ward's still on the ground, not doing its job.
I
But I
think
think
that
ready to put it
actually,
down.
I think that your map might be bugged because he has it back in his inventory now. Or,
I saw him just pick it up.
oh, okay, got it. All right, well, never mind then. I guess I'm
Were
wrong
you
on what's
actually
going
looking
on.
at the right wards?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
There were wards
Darkseer?
here. No, there was wards here, behind the
Oh,
tree.
oh, I
Unless
did
he was
not see
trying to
that.
hide it. I think he was trying to hide it from the Darkseer. That might have been another reason as to why it's put it there.
Mind games abound as Retarded ends up moving forward with the Ion Shell on top of him, but is not going to be able to burst down from this one. As we talked about, very, very high regen as well as armor and life, and they're going to be able to deward this one coming out on the side of RRQ. Going to be able to take that ward out, and easy 50 gold and experience. This is definitely going to be the lane to watch, though. You end up getting an Ice Shards catching on in this Ogre Magi. You could definitely end up falling really quickly, but 11 regen per second with the Tango on top of him. That is nothing to mess with. It's definitely a scary situation.
Yeah, and I think for PewPew as well, having that Observer Ward taken down really hurts them when it comes to the aggressive play because you need the vision if you want to get the charge through, if you want to get those snowballs, and considering how AK Racing spent so much time trying to hide the Observer Ward just to have it eaten like that, it's gonna kind of hurt, you know?
No, definitely. It certainly can. And one other thing that I'll mention real quickly, we're not seeing them in the same lanes right now, but the Meepo Winter Wyvern is definitely really potent problem that you're going to have to face as a Meepo. The Winter's Curse obviously just kind of being one of the best AoE disables while simultaneously turning you against yourself. So you take care of kind of both of the problems that you end up facing with Meepo because you get the AoE disable while simultaneously getting the single target burst damage by Meepo hitting himself in the face. So it's kind of one of the best counters in the game. We do end up seeing Retarded pick on up the bounty rune. Nicely done there. Going to be able to get away, just moving that extra bit away from the shards. And looking for a moment, like he might try and jump on top of the Dazzle here. He's going to be taking a decent amount of damage. Also over to the side, this is going to be the Darkseer trying to come on in. Oh, he might have overstayed his welcome a little bit. The damage is coming out on top of him. Right clicks abound, and it looks like, at least for the time being, he should be able to get out of here. Oh, the shards would have been able to bet a kill if they would have been able to find it. But I think he might still be in a bit of trouble here. Did they find this kill? Nice TP.
Oh, unless he bursts. Oh, that was so close. He gets out on, would you say 50 HP, more
Somewhere
or less?
around there, yeah.
It was very close. The heal bomb wasn't quite enough. If they had maybe another hero around the corner, I think it would have been enough to take him down. But Darkseer, I guess the good thing about this for PewPew is that they've technically sent the Darkseer back down. And he has to run all the way back into lane. That's wasted time for the Darkseer. Spirit Breaker gets taken down by a Tiny. Well, not what you expected in a one-on-one matchup.
It's something that you need to be aware of. Like, obviously, Spirit Breaker relatively tanky, but the burst damage coming out from Tiny, you just need to respect it. And it looks like he was a bit too far forward, not being cognizant or at least sort of willing to deal with. Ooh, Meepo taking a bit of damage there in the mid lane also, but that's not a maxed out Winter's Splinter Blast, rather. I just think that, like, if you get a little bit too fresh with him, he's definitely going to make you pay for it. And that time around, that was what ended up happening.
Yeah, so now with the lanes, it seems this mid lane Meepo, do you think he's happy as a clam here? Even though he almost died, he's not died. He's still CSing pretty well. Tusk actually gets a kill onto the Ogre Magi, it seems, and Fury's still going to hang around. He's not going to die. He's actually quite difficult to kill, but this Ogre Magi is not really working out in this bottom lane, it seems. He's soaking up Fury's EXP, and he's not contributing anything. I feel like he should actually be elsewhere rather than just being in this bottom lane.
Yeah, I mean, he has the regen, which is great, and so he can kind of just be the walking ion shell. But it does feel a bit like the hero's kind of out of place. It's not something where he's always going to be up in your face, and while he can right-click you down, until he ends up, really being able to have those extra items to sustain, it's going to be a bit of a problem. We do a lot of damage here. Darkseer needs to be careful. Snowball forward and kind of just running in circles. Dazzle ends up getting the last right click on him. Meanwhile, down here in the top lane, we end up seeing the Tiny continue to get bashed. He got bashed 2 times in the last engagement, but now at least it looks like Ogre realizes that there's going to be some tower or some stuff being taken here by the Meepo and soaking up a little bit of the experience at the same time. So level 3 on the Ogre, and he is going to try and catch on out the Meepo. Can he burst him down with that naturally high base magic resistance? They're not going to be able to find that kill, and maybe even Retarded might be in a bit of trouble here, as we do have the Tusk in the area. Just playing off, but look at, he's so tanky. How do you kill this guy?
The thing is, you just don't. You don't kill the Ogre Magi until you have enough resources to commit to him, but he was being super annoying. He's also denied a little bit of EXP to Meepo, which is going to hurt him a tiny bit. But the thing is, he didn't kill AK Racing. He didn't steal the stacks. He didn't block anything. So very, very minimal stuff that Retarded really could have done there. But I think for him, just taking the EXP at this point was the best scenario. If he managed to get a kill onto the Meepo, then I think obviously that's the ideal situation to be in. But the opportunity wasn't there for him. It was just the Meepo playing safe. He saw him, he backs off, doesn't die, loses essentially nothing.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about somewhat of what we felt like was the ineffectiveness of this Ogre Magi. This is the other thing that he does bring to the table, is that they can contest the pulls more so than you would be able to otherwise, and you can tank this as the Ogre Magi. Like, obviously, Darkseer also a relatively tanky hero, not danky hero. He does have the 7 armor and also has just a natural 1.1 regen, and normally ends up picking up that Soul Ring, which he's going to be able to get here in a second or two, so he gets a little bit of a better regen there also. But you get that extra bit of, tankability in the middle of everything. You're going to be able to survive throughout it and, tank the creep waves also. So it does look like Meepo is going to be denied a rune as he is going to head on back over to the other side. Unfortunately, not able to pick that one up, but he hasn't really been able to get a ton of kills or shown a ton of really versatility on this hero. Normally you think about this Meepo getting off to a really great start. Maybe once he ends up getting that level 9, it'll be a little bit of a different story.
Yeah, I think RRQ though, at some point they're going to have to try and deal with AK Racing before he gets those couple of major items, because we've seen how explosive a Meepo can be. Beautiful block actually by the toss to sort of delay Fury's exit, but now it's going to turn straight onto the Dazzle. Gyrocopter's coming in. This is going to be a very dead Darkseer. Although there was 4 heroes and now Retarded gets charged through by a Spirit Breaker plus the Snowball. Retarded's going to go down because of the Rocket Barrage. But look at the commitment from PewPew. They brought everybody to get those hero kills. Now Nether Strike onto Brown. He was way too close. There's the Shard's going to take down the Wyvern as well. And Shadow Fiend's here with no mana. Not going to be able to really do anything for the team. But PewPew were spoon-fed those kills. That should not have happened.
Yeah, and after the 3 kills, that's going to be a 1,200 gold swing, about 1,400 gold swing actually almost. And I think that they thought they were going to be okay because they didn't imagine that the Radiant was going to have vision. But this Observer Ward, really well placed in that mid lane, was able to give them that vision and be able to commit the Nether Strike on top of that Winter Wyvern, which was able to get them the kill. And you end up not being able to deward efficiently, and now all of a sudden you're paying the price for it. So really, really well played there. We do have a bit more farming that's going off over in the jungle. Let's take a look at team net worths. After the kill, PewPew is ahead again, which is not something that we were expecting. We were talking about this during the draft at the very beginning of game 1, that we are kind of expecting RRQ to be able to win this one. And now we end up getting a couple more damage being tossed around here. But do you think that this is nerves? What are your thoughts on PewPew's really sort of excellent play that we've been seeing so far?
Well, was it for PewPew or
PewPew.
RRQ? Because their names are similar. Oh my goodness. So for PewPew. Well, we saw PewPew. I feel like this team, they're well meshed together, because you saw last game. I'm pretty sure some people don't remember the drafts, but let's go over this roughly. PewPew played what was supposed to be a more of a passive counterplay sort of draft, where they needed time to come online. And instead of playing passively, they surprised RRQ and went for aggressive plays early. And PewPew's doing the exact same thing. And it just feels like it's a comfortable style for PewPew, where they always are going to exert pressure on the map, whether it be from a single kill or if it's a 5-man rotation that the other team is not expecting. And I think RRQ, they're not prepared for it. They're not expecting this. This draft a little bit more obvious because of their hero choices, but I don't think RRQ feels confident going super aggressive pre-10 minutes. I think after the 10-minute mark, we're going to see RRQ being a little bit more aggressive, as we see a quick kill on the Wyvern as he gets caught out. Toss also onto Dazzle. It's going to try and TP out, but unfortunately will get caught out and stunned. So 1-for-1 trade so far, but here comes a charge. They want to kill onto Fury, who's actually really low. This Darkseer can get bashed up. He doesn't even need the bash snowball. Going to connect onto Perfect here. Gyro and Toss together. Toss is there. They kill off the Tusk in the meantime. So it's going to be a 3-for-2 trade so far. Here comes a charge. They want to finish off Perfect, but unfortunately Spirit Breaker finishes on the high ground. And it's going to be another kill going in the way of RRQ. So the aggression from PewPew is now going to finally be punished as RRQ finally comes in with the reinforcing TPs.
That was really good. And this has sort of been the story of the game, I feel like, so far, as we do end up having another creep wave cut here behind the tier 2 towers. 2 Meepos just hang out over there. I think that counter initiations and simultaneously early rotations have been the story of this series so far, as we do end up having a couple of nets toss out, not quite able to catch the Winter Wyvern. in this game, whoever has been the team that have been responding to the aggression have been the ones that have been able to find the kill. This unfortunate charge, did that actually hit the Shadow Fiend in base? It looked like Spiritbreaker stopped, which would signal that the charge did end up connecting. Regardless, so I think that, you know, that rotation right there, they go on in really deep for the Winter Wyvern, stays alive after the charge with the Cold Embrace, and they're not able to get the kill quick enough, and so they end up overcommitting for it. And it's just felt like it's overcommittal after overcommittal. The jump forward, I think that Brown is going to go down here, and this is where what they really need to do is they get a quick kill and then back on out, rather than being able to stick around and then get picked off by several different heroes. And there's going to actually be the jump forward. They're going to connect on Azizi, and this is what I'm talking about. They might be overstaying their welcome a little bit. The shards have been connected. Now the Avalanche Toss combo, that's going to be Meepo going down. Tusk soon to fall also, and I was just talking about how you stick around too long and you just end up dying. It is a problem.
Yeah. It was those shards. Those shards blocked PewPew in, and that was a mistake from the Tusk, unfortunately. So, nice couple of hand-me-downs going in the way of RRQ. It's not really enough to tilt the game back into their favor completely, but it's nice to get that influx of gold going in the way of Tiny, and he's very close to a blink dagger as well. 11 minutes in. Is it going to be a blink? I presume it is, considering it's so close to the cost. Well, if he was going to go Ags, he would have bought the component by now.
Totally. I completely agree that I think that this is definitely what he's going to be going for. It's also somewhat interesting that they ended up, I guess that you got to have the mid player here. Last time was also Z's, a whole heck of a lot of Z's, but they switched up the roles that they played the Tiny in. Last time around it was a mid lane Tiny, and this time it's a safe lane, which makes sense considering the Shadow Fiend got picked up there. But I don't know, I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't end up formulating their draft if they wanted to go Tiny around being able to pick it up for that mid lane. I guess it didn't end up working for them also. But regardless, some more interesting things that I'm just noticing about the draft as we continue to move on into this game. It's much more slow-paced than it was last time, although there have been about 16 kills at this point at 12 minutes into it. It hasn't felt like that sort of crazy, frantic pace that we had last time around. And just sort of keeping their lanes a little bit more passively there, and it's just mainly been the overextensions that have been the reason for the kills, not the huge team fights as much.
And I think for PewPew, their main objective so far is they've been trying to buy time for Fox on this Meepo, because look at Meepo's farm. He hasn't really contributed too much aside from getting a couple of mid kills. He's got 3 kills, a death, but he's got Aghanims and Boot to Travels 12 minutes into the game. That is crazy amounts of farm on a Meepo, and that means that he's been getting ample amounts of farm. PewPew can be super happy with this, because Meepo hits an extremely early point where he's able to be super aggressive and does a crap load of damage with the team not really expecting this. Tusk getting killed onto the Darkseer quite nicely in that bottom lane. That was actually with the help of the team, but here comes reinforcements as Brown and Retarded wants to try and go for a counterplay, but it's just the 2 supports. They can't really do too much on their own. Meepo dies to perfect. There was a cooldown down bottom. I didn't see the kill under Meepo, unfortunately, but it's a 1-to-1 trade. Meepo dying to the Tiny. Nicely done by Koala.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the blink reveal on the Tiny there, to be able to take out the Meepo, who we talked about the fact that he's been getting the farm that he's needed. The big problem is that he's also been dying several times. If you take a look, he's currently 3-2, which isn't the best score in the world. And it looks like perfect Avalanche Toss combo. This is going to be dropping down the Gyrocopter very low. We do have the Snowball forward. Going to be on to perfect. Raises are not going to hit. They do also have the shards on out. Need to be careful here. Requiem of Souls is going to connect, as is the Toss, and that's going to be a kill. 4 heroes now down bottom in the bottom in the lane. Spiritbreaker is still charging after them, but I think that he probably ends up calling this off, not wanting to run on into 4 heroes. And another quick kill there as the Tusk goes down, as is the Gyrocopter.
Oh my goodness. So nice kills for RRQ. They're finally getting the ball rolling. Yasha first. 6%. Wow. Okay. 6% in games. Well, it's going to be Sand and Yasha. There's nothing wrong with the Yasha on the Shadow Fiend. But because we're seeing an early item pickup here on the Shadow Fiend and the Sand and Yasha, it means we're going to have a lot of early game commitment for RRQ, because you don't normally pick up a Sand and Yasha on a Shadow Fiend unless you want to fight early. It's an early fighting item, and it means that they want to go now. And I think they definitely have the draft to do this. They've got a Tiny who also scales well into the late game, but also does well at this point in the game, because his damage output is so high right now that if PewPew is not careful, they could lose a hero from 100 to 0 quite easily.
Definitely, and the big thing is going to be on this Dazzle and how well he sort of is able to deal with the, quick fingers. Need to respond to it very swiftly. They do end up tossing on the Weave to give a little bit of vision there, as Spiritbreaker recognizes there's a bit more than they could chew. a bit more than they could bite off than they could chew. As we end up mixing on up my phrases. But the other thing that I was going to mention is that the Tiny here is also going for an early battle build. He's going for the drums first instead of taking out that Aghanim Scepter, which I think is a fine build. It's going to allow you to still go back for the Ags, but it means that your power curve hits really hard right now also. And it's not going to be as much farming for the late game. So it's a perfectly fine build, but they need to sort of capitalize on it. And we're going to see this Meepo be playing a lot more sort of like you would see a Tinker, bouncing around all of the different lanes, trying to get the poofs off to keep the lanes pushed out. And what that's going to mean is that he's going to be somewhat vulnerable to the Blink Avatos, and now they end up getting the jump forward. They're going to be able to follow him here, and as we talked about, this is going to be able to see him. They have a lot of heroes in the area on the rest of the side of the Dire. Winter Wyvern ultimate has been committed onto the Tusk, so the Meepo that was low is going to be able to get out, and the last one also may be able to find his way out. So Tusk is the only one that ends up getting picked off there. Spirit Breaker should be able to walk away, and the big thing again is Meepo gets out.
Yeah, big commitment though to try and get a kill onto that Tusk. They get the kill with the Winter's Curse to keep him in place, but now it looks like we might be seeing a bit of a turnaround as PewPew wants to play aggressive themselves. They brought the Meepo back in, plus a Spirit Breaker and the Dazzle. Now the only hero here is a Winter Wyvern, so if they can get the catch onto this Wyvern, Brown should be taken down pretty quickly. So another strike to be the first spell to initiate, taking him down to half HP already. Charge is available, I believe. He's actually going to try and go from the other side to catch up. Never mind. Going to go for a charge down to the bottom section. A Tiny comes in with the double damage, and you don't want to mess with the Tiny. So no kill for PewPew. They brought heroes in all for nothing. And they're going to try and charge after Furo instead, it seems, but there's nothing really to chase them down.
We are currently seeing teams engaged in the act of learning as they see that, you know what, we shouldn't stick around when the TPs come in. We're going to get the heck out of here. This is good to see because you need to be able to sort of recognize when things are going a little bit not the way that you want. We do end up having the jump forward avalanche toss combo. Also the DD. There's going to be the net. Going to be able to catch onto him. A second one, keeping him in place with the rocket barrage going, but they are going to be able to run on through there. Charge going to connect. Is going to be Cold Embrace to keep him alive a little bit longer. Snowball forward onto Retarded. He is still going to be surviving throughout this. The wall has been dropped. There's going to be the grave, though. So key to be able to get off all of his damage, and he is going to be able to stay alive, but ends up getting killed in the end. Now, Darkseer's trying to surge away, but he does still get caught by that net. So much disable with this Meepo here, and the poof forward is going to be able to be enough. Triple kill on the Meepo. Everybody died at his hand, and only they ended up losing the Gyrocopter. Taking out the Tiny, I think that's worth it, definitely.
Absolute disaster actually for RRQ. So the Darkseer came into the fight a little bit later, and he was trying to get in there with the vacuum into wall combo. He only got the vacuum onto one here. Everyone else managed to bypass it because of the snowball. So it was very, very upsetting for the Darkseer, not really able to commit anything aside from just the mechanism to benefit the team. He could commit the wall, but it essentially did nothing. And then once you have the Meepo there, tons of damage, the nets are annoying, and the control really hurts RRQ. They can't afford to get net. So I think this game, Tiny is going to have to go for a BKB, but not just the Tiny, also the Shadow Fiend's going to have to commit to BKBs, because the nets from this Meepo, if Fox is able to get continuous nets off, it limits their mobility, and it helps PewPew set up for the engagement that they want, not the engagement that RRQ wants.
Definitely. The other thing, though, is that with that, you know, being able to, PewPew here is going to be able to catch on to Retarded yet again. There's going to be a nice little Fire Blast tossed on out. The Shard's not able to catch him. It looked like it was going to. I'm not sure if my eyes were deceiving me there or not, but the thing that I'll mention is that this places so much more emphasis on the Winter Wyvern. As the Winter Wyvern, you have to hit your Winter's Curse onto a Meepo with other Meepos around, because if you go for the BKBs on the Tiny and the Shadow Fiend, you're not going to be able to have the damage to burst him down after the fact. So you really need to be able to hit that, and also a Requiem probably is going to be what they need, or maybe at least a couple of raises onto the one Meepo that's cursed, and if they don't take him out in the middle of the fights, this is just going to go really terribly for them. The other thing is that if they end up getting an Aegis on this Meepo, it's all the more worse, because now they're going to be able to sort of, you know, have that extra survivability after the fact. We are seeing a Blade of Alacrity picked up on Meepo, which is, I'm not sure what this is going to end up turning into. Occasionally you do end up seeing Manta onto Meepos just to be able to get that extra illusion, because you can poof onto the illusions from him, but I'm not sure. It's not something that we often see.
Yeah, that was the only thing I could really think of if he was actually going to pick up that Blade of Alacrity. So we'll see if it's going to be the Manta style. There's nothing wrong with it. I guess it helps Meepo in the pushing department, because you can also just send the illusions there, and if someone clears the illusions, then maybe Fox can just go for a bit of a surprise gank. Just jump on top of them, have them not really expecting the kill happening from PewPew. So maybe some element of surprise things that we could be seeing very shortly.
Yeah. Well, and I guess also the other thing as I'm thinking more about Manta style is that if you end up going for the very much the split push route, then you can keep Meepos in certain lanes with those Manta style illusions and then poof onto them and then back on out. I want to make sure I'm pretty positive that you can poof onto Manta style illusions for Meepo. I wanted to make sure that that's the case because otherwise I would sound like the well, anyways, we'll leave it alone for now. Anyways, Meepo here is going to be able to take on out the Ancients. Diff Blade is actually going to be the option. So the Ghetto Sheep Stick. Kind of interesting.
Sheep Stick on Meepo or
no, like it's a ghetto sheep stick because you're going to be able to somewhat disable the enemies by being able to keep them in one place and poof on top of them. You don't disable their abilities, but you're at least able to lay those charges down on top of your opponents and slow them down a little bit.
Well, you know what you can actually do with the Diffusal Blade. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you can actually get rid of the Bloodlust as well. So that could be an added bonus to the Meepo. So he's draining not just mana, but you can also get rid of the Bloodlust. So if Tiny's running away and he's incredibly fast, then you can at least get rid of that the added movement speed and potentially catch heroes up. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with the Diffusal Blade. You can use defensively, aggressively. It's really up to how PewPew wants to play around with the Diffusal Blade. So options are available. The only thing I don't like about it is that they picked up the level 2 straight away. I feel like that they could have picked up the level 1 first, used the charges, and then move on to a level 2, but I don't know. What's the reason?
It goes up to 35 agility. We do end up having the Winter's Curse on top of Meepo. Is he going to kill himself? No, still staying alive throughout it. One more raise might be enough. He's probably going to need 2, actually, and it looks like Z's is going to end up going down there. Is going to be able to get the charge on top of Brown, and that's going to be another kill here. So you get 35 agility out of the Diffusal Blade level 2 as opposed to just the 20 on the level 1. It's a bit more gold. I mean, let's take a look at what the actual gold costs on it. Meepo has not bought a Fusel Blade this patch in 21 games. Wow. 8 times in 184 games, and usually around the 31-minute mark. And I would imagine that that's probably mainly just to be able to deal with something like an Omni Knight if you end up picking an Omni against a Meepo. To me, that would be the only other reason that you would end up seeing it. It's a very strange pickup, but Diffusal Blade is one of those items that's gotten buffed a few different times in terms of what it's capable of doing. So let's take a look real quickly. 3,100 gold for level 1. You end up getting a level 2, 3,800 gold, and that's for 35 agility. Compare that, if you will, to instead the E-Blade that comes on out where you get 40 agility for 435 or 437 gold. So kind of a different one, as I do miss a kill up on the top lane. Sorry about that one. I'm just pontificating here. It seems like it's kind of, you almost get the same amount out of an E-Blade with also being able to apply the extra damage from like the Ghost Scepter. So I don't know. It's a bit strange.
Yeah, I'm just confused as to why he's picked up the level 2 straight away. That's the only thing. If it was level 1, then it's fine. You can level it up to get the extra charges. But here we go in the base. Hoops right onto the Wyvern, crushes him, and now Retardo gets picked up. Perfect comes in. I think it's a mistake, my friend, and unfortunately it is. He's going to now be literally hoofed on by all those Meepos. Buyback by the Yoga Magi. They realize that they have to try and get some counter kills. At least BKB's been deployed on no love. Glyph has been used. And I think PewPew might not get anything outside of a T3 tower here. His heroes are going to come up very shortly, and Buyback's available. Vacuum Wall is going to do quite a bit of damage and also bring up some of those illusions. But here we go, Snowball onto Retarded. Charges, well, cancels the charge midway, though. Now Retarded multicasts is there. Here comes the Grave. They're going to keep him alive, and Tiny buys back. Perfect wants some revenge. Does he actually get anyone? He's got 1 kill so far for RRQ with just the Shadow, just the Spirit Breaker. Now the Dazzle. They want no love as well. It's going to end up with 3 hero kills. They lose a T3 and a Rax in the process, though.
They also bought back on the Tiny there, and I think that I might have seen a buyback on one of the heroes. I'm not sure about that. We'll take a quick little look in a second. But yeah, you said it. It's losing the barracks this early on is just devastating. And the fact that they didn't have the Winter Wyvern there in time to be able to sort of make that crucial, Winter's Curse. She had it up the entire time that she was dead and just wasn't able to get it out. Okay, so it was only Tiny that ended up buying back in that fight. Ogre does have his on cooldown from earlier on. And so, I mean, we're starting to get to these points where the huge item's up. You got the Sheep Stick finish now on the Meepo, on top of the extra agi that he gets from the level 2 Diff Blade. he's hitting for so much damage right now. 152 a pop on top of the poof damage. It's just a really dire situation for them.
Yeah, it's really, really unfortunate. But let's not count RRQ out, though. They still have an opportunity to come back. They just need to find a weakness in PewPew. They just have to find an opening, potentially get. I think at this point, one kill is not going to be enough for RRQ. They need to get at least 2 kills before they're ever able to really progress onto an objective. Because the Meepos are always going to push the lanes, and even though there's supposed to be a 4 versus 5 engagement, it's actually not 4 versus 5. We got Meepos to count in as well. So for RRQ, they need to find that opening, and I'm not too sure if it's going to have to be them continuously playing this sort of counterplay Dota, because that's all that they've really been doing. They haven't really been the ones to initiate for the past 10 minutes. So I would like RRQ to maybe go for a smoke gank and try to find somebody, but then again, if you also look at PewPew's positioning, then it's quite difficult to get that pick off.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about positioning. It feels like the only way to really get back into this game is for PewPew is to be able to sort of, or rather for RRQ, is to be able to hit a Winter Wyvern ulti on top of a Darkseer vacuum wall, and then follow that up with a Requiem of Souls. And positioning has been really consistently solid for PewPew, as you mentioned. They're not really keeping too many of the Meepos nearby each other. 3 is the most that we're seeing at any given one time, and it's because they realize that, you know, you still can definitely throw this game. There's no question about it. It's absolutely within the realms of throwing, and if you're not careful, it's going to end up happening. The other thing is, Surge purgeable?
Yes.
I'm not sure if it is.
It is.
Okay, so
It's
maybe
purgeable.
that's the other thing there, but yeah, you mentioned
You
the
can purge.
blades.
Yeah, you can purge a lot of buffs. You can even purge off Hex.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll see.
Yeah,
They're
just purge
smoking
off.
on up.
Just purge off any disables, really, and I think that's going to be useful. Actually, now that I think about it, this diffusal blade is actually a little bit more useful for the Meepo, because, for instance, maybe a particular Meepo, really low Meepo, gets craggy. You can also purge off craggy.
That's kind of a cool
So-
one as well.
It's going to be a cool play, though. So it depends if Fox actually wants to use the diffusal blade, because it's, you know, it's still sitting at 8 charges, hasn't been touched. Maybe it's just a passive diffusal blade. Who knows? I would like to see it used at some point. Maybe just saving it for a potential Hex.
Definitely. Well, BKB soon to be finished on the Tiny. We were thinking that this was going to be his next item, and unfortunately for him, it is going to be his next item, which means that he's going to be getting around a 30-minute BKB as his third item. It's really, really been hard for him so far in terms of the amount of farm he's been able to get, and a lot of that going over the side of the Shadow Fiend instead. And, you know, we often think about the fact that some heroes are a little bit more greedy than others, and you need to be able to have the farm distribution be pretty solid, and it's very difficult when you end up only having one jungle to sort of stack on up in the early stages, and then a Meepo's jumping around in it the whole time, poofing all over the place, taking away all your farm. It's been hard for them to find the items that they've needed, and this has sort of been a different style of game from the last one. Last one, it was just balls to the wall, fighting throughout the entire course of it. This time, it's been a slow, just burn that's been going on, and a 14k net worth lead on top of around 12,000 experience. It's just been constant pressure in a way that hasn't really resulted in a ton of kills going the side of RRQ, and I feel like sort of disciplined is really the word that I want to say for it, if that even makes sense given the way that these two teams have been fighting against each other. It's looked pretty good for them on the side of PewPew.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's just PewPew. Okay, so look at PewPew's movement. They're moving as a unit. They know what they want as a team. They're always pushing lanes. They're continuously farming Meepos. They're putting aggression onto RRQ, but they're never doing anything crazy. They always do everything with a plan. They never hesitate. They know what they want. And at this point, they're trying to just wait for the Roche. Roche isn't actually going to come up for another minute, so they're going to have to wait around for that. Whereas for RRQ, at this point, they're just trying to put together as much as they can, and as much as they can, because they're so limited in terms of map control, and they're also very worried about trying to go for any sort of aggressive play, because you look at buyback status, and look at the status for RRQ, it's only on the Shadow Fiend. So if they lose another team fight, they are not going to have buyback on anything aside from Shadow Fiend, and that might be game, because Meepo by himself pushes stupidly quickly. If the team's there as well, it's just a bonus.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, you know, you sort of can see something like what we saw in the last game in the early stages with the Tiny. you know, you have all of the rest of the side of PewPew here. This time around, they're going to be switching places. They send in the Gyrocopter, they send in the Dazzle, they send in the Tusk into that mid lane maybe, and then Meepo just ends up riding out the other side. But they're not feeling comfortable going yet, and do want to wait for that Roshan, who is finally up, and it looks like both sides are going to know this, as we do end up getting the little creep in there, getting punched in the jaw, and then Tusk just walking away. It's a sucker punch and walk away. Not something that's very kind, but regardless, Roche is up. We'll see where they end up going. BKB now finished on Tiny with no Agnum Scepter. Do you think this is going to be enough damage on their side?
It's hard to say. At this point, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens first. So we now have RRQ coming in with the smoke. Now they're expecting PewPew to be in the Roche pit, but they're not. So they're just going to have to wait for the moment, and PewPew doesn't see them yet, so RRQ, they're going to have to wait. I think the duration of the smoke is going to end by the time the Roche actually happens, or maybe even Roche isn't going to happen yet, because PewPew is taking their time.
Well, Bloodlust set up Tiny, running uphill, is going to be able to find him out immediately. There's the jump forward. Snowball keeping alive the Tusk, at least for a little while. Meepo now up in the top lane is going to start to rat them on out. I do believe that's what we're going to end up seeing there. Nice Shallow Grave keeping alive the Tusk a little bit longer. Dazzle ends up falling, but Meepo's in the middle of all of them. That's going to be a kill for him. Godlike Street trying to take on down this Tusk. Perfect is going to be able to get a good amount of damage, just barely staying alive. They end up finding the kill off the back of it. Really well played there, as Darkseer was actually the one that ended up getting that kill. It is going to come at the cost of Brown, maybe. Are they going to be able to kill him? It's 4 heroes dead right now. Like, they're in a really great spot. Charge forward. Can they get this kill? That's going to be one jumping in on top of him. No! Meepo bought back to try and find on out and be able to TP on top of that Spear Breaker, but he's not able to get there in time. Boots of Travel 2. Oh, man. This would have been the play. I think that the Ogre ends up getting out here, though.
But Meepo's going to get Aegis, though. That's the thing. And RRQ can't contest it. Maybe they can try and bring the Darkseer in, but there's no wall. They can maybe try and vacuum all the Meepos onto the high ground. We can't really do anything outside of that, though. So,
yeah, it's weird, because, like, you end up seeing about a 5,000 gold swing at the end of the day, but because they were so far ahead, and Meepo is still so far ahead at 12k net worth, or excuse me, them being 12k net worth on the plus side, the Aegis matters all that much more, and now they can push for that high ground.
Well, so even though RRQ had a relatively decent team fight, they weren't able to make anything happen out of it. And I think for them, it's really disappointing, because they had one decisive team fight, and they're at a standstill. They can't make anything happen. They're just stuck in the same place as before. It really hasn't changed.
Dire's bottom tower is under attack.
Well, tier 2 tower may be soon to fall. It does look like RRQ are in a position where they want to try and defend this. It is worth noting that the Meepo is a little bit further behind, and do end up actually going over on the top lane. They're going to be able to find out the Shadow Fiend. Huge kill there. That is really, really unfortunate. Buyback status on him. He does have it, but really does not want to spend it if he doesn't have to. Trying to build on forwards one of those other survivability items. Might be going for a Satanic next. Not exactly sure. We do end up having another initiation found out over here. It does look like Spirit Breaker is going to go down as the gank train finds him out, but maybe looking for another initiation here. Meepo is getting bold as brass, jumps on top of the Winter Wyvern. Winter's Curse has been committed. This could be a disaster. Vacuum wall on top of the toss. Is he going to go down? He does. Aegis is still up, though. Meanwhile, the Gyrocopter is starting to beat away at all of them. BKB is popped, so Requiem didn't end up doing almost anything. Meepo is still here. If they wanted to go on in here, they end up tossing on back the Shadow Fiend, because they did not want to go into that fight. Nice force staff up to the high ground, as Darkseer's not going to get taken out, but Meepo gets the kill on the tower. Both tier 2s gone, but as is the top tier 3 and the barracks over here that we ended up talking about earlier.
So in the end, PewPew loses the Aegis, and for RRQ, they don't really lose too many objectives. They don't even lose any of their T3 towers. If you were the Dire squad, I would be very happy with what they currently got. Aegis wasted on PewPew, and they got essentially nothing out of that entire engagement. And I think PewPew could be looking at this and thinking, well, we actually blew a really good asset. Do we continue on with what we're doing? I think it is, because it looks like they're going to go for a smoke here. They do smoke. One Meepo actually didn't get counted, unfortunately, so got the black sheep, but it doesn't really matter, as they only need the main one. And down the mid lane they go, hoping that someone's going to come out, but everyone's up towards the north, so this might be a bit of a wasted smoke. Unless they walk up north, they're going to go up there. And RRQ, I think they're just going to get out in time.
And they're realizing that this is definitely a dangerous situation. And I think that it would have been worth it for the... Oh, maybe going to be able to find the Darkseer. That's actually a pretty big kill. They're going to be able to take him out very swiftly. and now may be comfortable. You don't have the full combo. Does he have buyback? He does not. For 150 gold, oh man, that is really unfortunate. Actually, wait, hold up. On the top lane, oh god, I thought for a second that maybe the Ion Show was going to be able to get a couple of creep kills, and he's actually only 67 gold away because the Ion Show creep ends up going down. Man, what a freaking unfortunate situation for him. And now they're going to be able to go on in for this one. Winter Wyvern ulti is the only thing that's going to be able to be there for that big AoE control.
Well, let's see if this is actually going to happen here for RRQ. So small stun onto Koala for now as No Love is just throwing out the little missiles. But here we go. They're going to try and jump in, and Perfect completely locked in because of the ice shards. And he can't actually move. He's sandwiched in and bashed up. 17% is going to be there for our Spirit Breaker. So Tiny goes down, no buyback for 67 seconds. RRQ still managed to hold the high ground there, and PewPew still hesitant with the objectives, and looks like they're going to go down bottom instead, surprisingly enough, as the T3 is already down, the reactors are exposed, and they can start chipping away at those. PewPew still have to be careful. This is a high ground defense, so RRQ has a slight advantage in that department. So stun, no multicast onto No Love, and Blink in. Wall vacuum doesn't really do too much as it only connects onto 2 as one actually got into a snowball. So we do have our Tusk getting out quite safely. That is a huge asset actually used for almost no return. Wall is now down. It's still up for now, but it's going to go down very quickly.
Yeah, and there they're going to be in the middle of all of it, and able to jump in on top of Brown. This is going to be a disaster. They end up finding him out, but there's the Winter's Curse. It does come out in the end, and that's going to be Meepo going down. Winter Wyvern ends up getting the kill there. 1,000 goals going their direction. Looks like they're going to find the Tusk also. So 2 huge kills and no buyback on Meepo at this point for another 150 seconds. He's dead for 100 seconds. So they did get the tier 3 tower in the bottom on the first round of ratting that ended up coming out, but they end up losing the Meepo for it, and a good amount of gold also going back their direction. Oh man, they wanted to be able to pick them off, but the clutch Force Staff there, I think that it was Ogre's Force Staff, or maybe it was the Darkseer's. Regardless, they ended up keeping them alive.
That was unfortunate for PewPew. They wanted to go for the aggressive play to burst those heroes down, but because there was all the defensive spells coming out, and in particular the Winter's Curse killing off the Meepo, once the Meepo is gone, PewPew has to back out. The Gyrocopter himself is not sufficient enough to really carry his team through. And I think the sad thing for RRQ, though, is that even though they won a relatively nice team fight and didn't lose too much in the process, they win a big team fight like that, but they can't translate it into any objectives. The only one going out of the bases is Koala, but they're not really pushing any of these towers. And I think even worse is that even if they pushed and they maybe got more kills than they originally did, there's still a T2 tower in all of the lanes. They have to push them all out again, and I think by the time they even reach the T3 towers, heroes would have started respawning, and I think RRQ would back out by that point.
Yeah, it is definitely the big problem. Now I will say, you saw the power of that ability on the side of Winter Wyvern. The fact that you're able to almost single-handedly kill off probably the most important hero on the side of PewPew, it shows how hard this might end up being for them to sort of finish this game off. Meepo is an incredibly strong hero in terms of what he's able to do, but isn't the hardest carry in the world, and he can actually still be out-carried by some of these heroes. I think that Tiny, he's going to be able to be definitely really relevant, and now that he's going to start to get this Aghanim Scepter up, you're going to see the AoE damage over the top of a lot of them, also being able to have that burst. Maybe even if you end up getting enough gold on this Ogre Magi, you end up being able to have that Aghanim Scepter up on him, and that's a bit more of the single target burst to really get the finishing touches. But I'm starting to get slightly worried. Like you said, they're not translated into objectives, but maybe you end up getting 1 or 2 more of these kills with a solid Winter's Curse, and you're going to be able to really find them afterwards, because the long respawn times are coming in, and buyback status can become really, really relevant.
But that's also a lot of pressure to put onto one person, though. If you're going to be relying completely on the Winter's Curse, they have to make sure that Brown doesn't get caught. And I think with the Blink Dagger, it makes his job a little bit easier, because he can sit so much further back and just come into position if necessary to get the curse off. But again, he also needs to make sure he doesn't get disabled during the fight. So nothing like bashes, nothing like charges, no snowballs. He has to get the curse off, because I think if it doesn't happen, RRQ is probably done for without the disable.
Definitely. There's no doubt about it. And We do end up seeing several of the Force staffs on these other heroes. They don't have the traditional super defensive support, but they've been able to itemize to make it happen. So, you know, Ogre Magi there with the Force staff. Brown even has a Force staff now. You end up having it on the Dark Seer. All of these heroes are capable now of being able to keep him alive. And you saw there, even though he ended up getting initiated on by the Meepo, Meepo picked him out of the crowd. All three of them were over there. He jumped on top of him, got the sheep stick down, but unfortunately wasn't able to seal the deal because they Force staffed away the Winter's Curse as the poofs came in. So all in all, and then afterwards, he ended up getting the Geostrikes down on top of the Winter Wyvern, but didn't have enough damage to burst him down before the curse came out. I think that with all of these defensive items in a 5-on-5 engagement, RRQ actually do win, just because there isn't enough AoE damage after the poof comes out on the side of PewPew to be able to have enough follow-up to really make it the win happen. So I just think that it's becoming more and more scary for them. And of course, net worth matters less and less as this game continues, just because of the fact that you're going to start take objectives. The thing I'm curious to see is how this E-Blade ends up working out on the side of Meepo. If he's able to get like the Hex E-Blade on top of a poof, that's going to really be able to kill anybody in this matchup, I think.
And I think it might be the Shadow Fiend that could be a particular target. Meepo's just patiently waiting, but I don't think Fox is going to get it as Shadow Fiend's backed out. But yes, I would like to see the E-Blade helping out the Meepo just burst down those targets, because you're taking an extra, what, 40% magical damage? And that's going to be huge, because you take into consideration what he does now with all the Meepos. What is he going to do after the E-Blade? I don't think any hero with any amount of HP would survive most of the Meepo poofs. I think he would. I think the tanky heroes would actually get out with maybe a sliver of HP, more or less. A Shadow Fiend, I think he won't get out at all. Tiny, because it's tankier, he'd maybe be able to survive it. Or if he can at least get the BKB off, is fine.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to keep in mind also is just the Ether Blast that comes out on its own, because you get, right now he's got, what is this going to end up being? Almost getting close to 200 Agi on Meepo. It's really, really a lot of damage. And if you end up doing that times 2, you get 400 roughly damage in a burst on top of all of the poofs. That's hovering around, when you end up getting the amplified damage, like almost a 2,000 damage nuke from the Meepo. It's ridiculous how much it bursted actually is. And of course that's going to be reduced by your magic resistance that you have basically. But, you know, a Tiny here, he's going to end up going down to well below half HP as we end up seeing a charge forward. They're going to try and take them on out here. Maybe dive in a bit deep for this one. Force staffs have been engaged and they end up backing out. Not going to want to take this as Tiny ends up finishing off his Aghanim Scepter. They were thinking about it,
just respawned. Roche has just respawned, and I think the Rocket may have spotted this out as well. I'm not too sure. But PewPew, I think they're going to double check it anyway. Or maybe they're just going to check the rune, who knows. But Roche is up, and this is going to be a huge asset, not just to one team, but to both. And I think this next Roche fight might dictate the flow of the game. Dire Courier's died. Where?
Not exactly sure. Let me see. I just see that it ended up dying. There's nothing on it, thankfully, for them, but it does create a little bit of problems for them. I think that maybe it was ended up scouting them out. Regardless, they're going to come on over here and try and contest this. The shards are going to block them off from walking down to the low ground, and based off of how quickly they take Roshan, they're going to leave it alone for now. They didn't end up committing the Meepos for it. Meepos actually pushing out the top lane while this is all going on. So applying the pressure multiple sides of the map, this is going to become harder and harder for them because they're getting pulled in multiple different directions. Shadow Fiend in the back lane, I don't know if this is the hero they want to initiate on. Honestly, there isn't a great initiation target. I think that they need to kill off the Winter Wyvern, but as you mentioned earlier on, because of the fact that you have that Blink Dagger on her, there's no real reason for them to be able to push that far forward with her. And now we end up seeing Meepo jump on in. This is going to end up being a very quick Roshan, and they're not going to be able to respond quickly enough. But he actually doesn't have a spot right now, and they're going to put it on the Gyrocopter instead.
Ooh. I guess I don't mind this. Meepo is tanky in himself, but we have seen him get bursted down regardless. So I think without the Aegis on Fox, he still has to play the exact same way as he has before, just maybe tune it down a bit in the aggressive department, because we have seen him go for those really crazy plays hoping he was bursting heroes down. So Aegis on our Gyrocopter, that's to be expected. And who did the cheese go on to? Spirit Breaker? Yes, it did. They have extra lives, they have extra HP pools. Is it going to be enough to push high ground into RRQ though? It's hard to say. We need to see how this fight happens, where the damage is going to be thrown out, and who gets the initiation. It's going to be, in particular, the initiators. I think they're going to dictate the flow of this team fight, because whoever jumps on who first should have the edge more or less, unless, for example, Brown does the magnificent play. Got to keep an eye on the Wyvern.
It's going to be really important to make that happen. They're starting to hit here onto the barracks. There's going to be the Avatos combo. This is onto the Aegis carrier, though, and ZZZ ends up getting punched in the jaw once, running back away. Now they have the initiation onto Brown. There's going to be a charge forward as well as the Nether Strike, but the Force Staff's keeping them alive, at least for the time being, and this gives enough time for them to be able to start taking out the barracks. They brought inside the Snowball. This is going to be a bit of a problem. No Love now initiated on from the other side. Tusk goes down. We do end up seeing the Satanic popped at this point in time. Now also the Meepo dropping really low. Is he going to be able to get out? They get out on all the Meepos. None of them are going to end up going down after the Winter's Curse was committed. Now off to the side, also Perfect is starting to drop a little bit low, but might be able to take on down that Spirit Breaker. We do end up seeing the Aegis finally popped on this Gyrocopter, but he's coming back big as can be, and that's going to be the poof that they needed for that one. Meanwhile, the E-Blade is going to be committed onto the Brown, and I think that this might have been enough to make it happen. So much damage from these Meepos. Barracks are falling. There's no Winter's Curse. Avatos combo or not, they end up getting the vacuum on top of them, but where's the follow-up? None to be able to be seen. I think that they might be starting to drop a little bit low. Turn around, dropping out those nets the other direction. Gyrocopter in the middle of everything, drops on down the call down, but eyes on the prize. All of the barracks are now dead, except for the one in the mid lane. They haven't taken out that last range barracks. Poof out by the Meepo, but 4 heroes are dead. Oh, goodness.
So what happened with the Meepo was he E-bladed the low Meepo, and there was no magical burst to pick him off. That was it.
Oh, God.
So that E-blade saved Meepo's life. And RRQ, they had to look at that, and they're probably thinking, what the hell do we do? Oh my goodness, I was actually sitting there thinking, whoa. RRQ's gonna have to tilt after seeing that, but Jesus, Raxas are now down. But RRQ is not in a horrible situation. They've got a Tiny that can deal with the creep wave relatively well, but it's still gonna be super creeps and almost mega creeps once that final Rax in the mid lane gets taken down. And then after that, RRQ are going to be confined to their base until PewPew decides to fight. And that's never where you want to be. And I think unfortunately here for RRQ is their heroes just aren't big enough to be in the same position as PewPew last game. Because last game, PewPew, even though they were the aggressors and they had the advantage, they had huge late game carries. You compare a Tiny and Shadow Fiend to what PewPew has, the Gyrocopter and the Meepo. Meepo is massive right now. I don't think they have enough to really take down Fox unless they have to commit almost everything into killing him off.
Definitely. He did end up trading out the Diffusal Blade for the Scotty, which I think makes sense. We're also seeing the Ogre Magi here run on over and start to place a few wards. This is definitely very necessary because their vision game has been incredibly impeded, but it's actually vision all the way on the other side of the map, which isn't going to help them a ton in the team fights. I would have loved to maybe see them inside their own base, because if you take a look at their sort of effective vision at this point, actually, we're going to see an engagement here in a second or two. Bloodlusted up on the Tiny. They're going to jump forward. Avatos combo doesn't hit onto anybody. They do end up bringing one on back there. Dazzle is a little bit caught out from the rest of the crowd. The Snowball forward still keeping him alive. No Love is in the middle of everybody, and it looks like the Tusk is going to be able to stay alive at the end of the day with the Mechanism Guardian Greaves combo. Are they going to be able to burst anybody down here? Shadow Fiend takes on out the Tusk, but meanwhile, the Meepo yet again kills off that last barracks. Mega creeps are up. If they get out now with anybody, I think that they're going to be fine with it. As long as they don't lose everybody, pretty much. And Meepo actually is just going to be able to take out the Tier 4 tower and then poof on out of there, yells one last Meepo as he leaves the base, and that's the danger. You can't push out your lanes, you're going to end up getting ratted.
So PewPew are just using the rest of their team as a diversion at this point, just forcing RRQ out of their base to do the backdoor rat plays. This has to be so frustrating if you're RRQ, and unfortunately for them, they don't actually have a hero sufficient enough to just stay in base to kill off the Meepos. They need 2 or 3 heroes to commit
Craggy.
if they want to kill him.
Up top lane, they still
Not
end up
quite
getting him.
Yeah. I don't think Craggy's going to be enough to stop this Meepo.
Oh, he is a terrifying, terrifying little man, little Geomonster. Geomonster, that's the real name. They don't end up hitting there on the net because of the blink away on both of those heroes, and they're able to make their way out. Actually, it's just the Winter Wyvern of the blink, and I think that now at this point you're hoping for one huge Winter's Curse, and maybe, just maybe, going to be able to find some type of initiation, but it's too much. Like the fact that the Gyrocopter also, he's kind of been the unsung hero. He's been the backbone that's consistently been there to be able to soak up a bit of damage. He had the Aegis on him last time. deal with the supports to a large extent. The Meepo's been sort of taking the high priority targets, but Vale now up on the Darkseer. They're hoping for one last ability to burst them down here. I just don't know if it's going to be enough.
Oh man. So RRQ still hanging on to their base. What can they do? They can't even kill the creeps. That is how upsetting it is. Oh my goodness.
Well, they're hanging on here. It's worth noting this is going to be, if they end up losing their last game in this tournament. They really don't want to end up going out like this, but it's feeling more and more like that's what's going to happen. Raises or no raises, you talked about it. They can't even deal with these creeps effectively. There's going to be the call down. Vacuum wall onto one. NGU dropping a little bit low, but the BKB has now been popped. They catch on out the Darkseer. They're in the middle of everybody. They're starting to burst through them. Meepo on the other side does end up getting Winter's Cursed up, and he goes down. On the buyback from him, though, that's what they needed to have happen. He's looking for a target to jump back in on, and they're going to be there and starting to keep their eyes on the prize. Yet again, Ancient soon to fall. PewPew looking to be the ones that are going to move on to the next round of this tournament. A couple of really, really entertaining games that we ended up seeing.
Very crisp plays though from PewPew. I think that was the major thing. Their team just seemed much more polished compared to RRQ, whereas for RRQ, they didn't play horribly. They just had they made a couple of errors that I think really hurt them in their progression through the game. And essentially, PewPew dictated the flow of the majority of the game. And they just had it go their way for the entire portion of the game. Whereas for RRQ, they had a couple of moments where they had a little bit of control. But it was to the point where they didn't really have too much going their way to really turn it into a snowball. It was just more of a mini comeback. And then all of a sudden, back to equal.
Yep,
So,
definitely.
very upsetting.
Very much so, and a couple of really incredible plays that we saw on both sides. I think PewPew, as we've talked about multiple times now, coming out on top from the end of it, and I'm excited to see what they end up bringing to the table forward. We saw Team Redemption, also another team that I was not expecting to do as well as they did, perform incredibly high, at an incredibly high level, and across the board, there's been a really great tournament for seeing those types of plays. So. Continue to follow us. I'll throw on up the brackets after we end up going to a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a second or two. Thank you guys very much for watching. It's an absolute pleasure casting for you all. This is what we end up doing. We love to do it, and we hope you all enjoyed. At Lyrical Dota, at Danny Lee Casts, and at Corrupt Dropped Bear on the stats. Stick around in just a second or two because we are going to be having a second round here, and let me double check that I end up knowing what they are. I'll throw what they are afterwards. I'm too enthralled in this game. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back in a flash.